What's up guys, hope you're all doing well. For this week's video I'm going to be talking about how we set up our macros for either a cutting phase or a bulking phase. Let's get to it. Right, first things first, there's no perfect starting point. So don't panic if it's not quite right the first time, because it's just a starting point and you can manipulate the numbers up and down as you go along and you figure out how your body reacts to the different foods. So step number one, what you want to do for step number one is figure out what your maintenance calories are. Now, there's no easy way to do this if you don't already know what they are. So what you're going to have to do is either for a week keep a food diary or use MyFitnessPal. If you don't know about MyFitnessPal already, I'm sure most people do. It's basically an app where you can track every food that you have throughout the day, split up into breakfast, lunch, dinner and snacks, and it will tell you the breakdown of all the macronutrients, and it's really helpful because you can also add your own foods. If you create a meal quite regularly, you can put in the ingredients on MyFitnessPal and it will tell you the macros for each one. So what you want to do is track what you're eating every day for a week, so that at the end of the week you can get a pretty good idea of a basic average for how many calories you're having per day, and also how much protein, fats and carbs. Step number two, once you've done that, is you want to pick your goal. Are you either building muscle or losing fat? Now it's really important, especially for beginners, to differentiate between the two, because how we set up our macros and how we change them going forward is going to depend on your end goal. So if you wanted to lose fat as your goal, then we would have to decrease calories and be in what's known as a calorie deficit. And if we wanted to build muscle, we have to increase calories, so we're in what's known as a calorie surplus in order to build muscle. Step three, now that we know what our maintenance calories is, we need to break it down into how much protein, carbs and fats we have as part of those calories. For those that are interested, for every gram of protein, it equals to 4 calories. It's the same for carbs, and fats are more calorie dense and they have 9 calories per gram of fat. But let's start with protein. When setting up your protein values, a good rule of thumb is to have between 1 and 1.5 grams of protein per pound of body fat. So for example, at the moment, I'm around 175 pounds. So for me, if I was to go the higher end, the 1.5, that would be about 260 grams of protein, which is roughly about what I'm having at the moment. Now, how do you decide whether to have 1 gram or 1.5 grams of protein? It's an interesting question that a lot of people struggle with. Now, what I tend to do is, for people that are hard gainers, that struggle to gain weight and that are generally quite skinny, also known as ectomorphs, I'd go at the higher end of the protein range. So go for more of like the 1.5 grams per pound of body fat. Someone who gains weight really easily and struggles to keep the weight off, then it's probably going to be better for you and a safer starting point for you to start at the lower end, so the 1 gram of protein per pound of body fat. Right, now that we've done the protein, we're going to be filling up the remainder of the calories with fats and carbs. Now generally, for a balanced diet, unless you're on a high fat and low carb diet, which I won't go into in this video, I'm going to try and keep things as simple as possible just to set up a good starting macro point for everyone. So generally, for a balanced diet, you want about 15 to 30% of your calories to come from fat. Unlike the protein, there's no hard and fast rule with regards to whether you look at the high end of the fats or the low end. Because unlike a lot of people make out on the internet, fat by itself does not make you fat. Being in a calorie surplus will get you to make some fat gains. But fat by itself, if you're in a calorie deficit and you eat shitloads of fat, it's not going to make you fat. Our body needs fat to function properly. So the way I would suggest that you set up your macros in relation to the fat portion of them is to just do it based on preference. If you prefer having higher fats, then you're going to have to slightly lower the amount of carbs that you put in, and vice versa. If you rather enjoy your carbs over the fats, then you're going to have to go on to the lower end of that fat scale. And again guys, that doesn't have to be set in stone. If you halfway through your diet, you kind of realize that actually my body reacts a lot better to higher fats and lower carbs or higher carbs and lower fats, then by all means start playing around with those figures and see what works best for you, what you enjoy more. But one thing I would say about starting to play around with your diet is I wouldn't do it straight away. The way that we can figure out whether something works is if we do it for a prolonged period of time, so we can have a solid base of evidence to show that something's either working or not working. If you're constantly moving the variables, then the results are going to go up and down, and because you're changing loads of variables at once, then you're not going to know what's affecting what. So I suggest you stick with your original diet plan for maybe 4 to 6 weeks before starting to play around with it, because by that point you should get a fairly decent understanding of whether it's working for you or not. Now on to carbs. So now that we've done fats and proteins, carbs are obviously going to make up the remainder of the calorie allowance that you have. Simples. Now let's get on to the more difficult bit. Now that we've figured out our maintenance calories and broken it down into protein, carbs and fat values, we need to talk about the different goals and how we change our macros to help reach those different goals. So I'm going to start with bulking. As I said at the beginning of the video, now that we've got our maintenance calories, if we wanted to start building muscle, we'd have to start increasing those calories above the maintenance level. So what I usually do when I'm in a bulking phase to start with is I will keep the protein values the same, because I find that as our weights start going up and our food starts increasing, the protein values tend to increase naturally, because you'll have protein in the carb sources and fat sources that you'll be adding into your diet. So there's no need to really play around with the protein too much. So what I tend to start doing, depending on whether you are a hard gainer or an endomorph, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to want to increase your calories from between 100 to 200 a week. Hard gainers, because your body can deal with the increase a lot better, you can go with the higher range of that increase, which is the 200 calories. So the way I'd suggest increasing those calories and splitting those increases up into fats and carbs is I would use the same rules as when you're setting up your macro breakdown and using the 15 to 30% of those 100 to 200 calories as fats, and then do the remainder as carbohydrates. So that's your weekly increases, and I would only continue increasing in those increments if your weight's not moving. Another good rule of thumb when you're trying to build muscle is you want to aim for about a half a kilo increase a week, no more than that, because if you go over that, then it's likely going to be a lot of fat gain as opposed to lean muscle gains. And let's move on to cutting. So as I said at the beginning, if we're cutting, now that we've got our maintenance calories, we want to slowly start decreasing the amount of calories that we have below our maintenance level, so that our body starts utilizing our fat stores and burning those fat stores to make up for the difference. And now that we've talked about bulking, you can probably guess that we're going to do the exact opposite when we're cutting, and we start decreasing the calories slowly. However, the only difference is with the bulk, because we don't want to go into too much of a deficit, because then we'll shrivel away and lose all our gains, we want to do it a lot more controlled than the bulk. So again, you want to aim to be in about a 500 calorie deficit is pretty good. So to be honest, if you want to do it quite slowly and not worry about losing your gains, and if you're starting from maintenance as opposed to starting from a surplus, I'd suggest starting to lower the calories from between 50 to 100 calories a week, so that we're not cutting too aggressively. That way you'll have a nice steady state of fat loss, and you won't become starving overnight, and you can give your body time to adapt to it. Right guys, so that about sums it up. I hope it was helpful to the people who have never set up their macros before, never tried to figure out their maintenance calories, or even set them up for a bulking phase or a cutting phase. As always guys, I welcome feedback. I relish the feedback, because at the end of the day I make these videos as much as it's to help myself get better at communicating. It's mostly for you guys, so that you can get some value out of these. So do let me know if you have any chosen subjects or topics that you guys would like help with and you'd like me to make a video on. I'll be more than happy to make those. You know what to do. Go out and make some gains, lose some fat, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next video. Hope you have a great day. Peace out, Fit Fam.